From Washington, this is the Macrocast with Hamilton Place Strategies and Markets Policy Partners.
Good morning. It's Friday, August 19th. You're listening to the Macrocast. This is Tony Fratto from Hamilton Place Strategies. John Fagan, Brendan Walsh from Markets Policy Partners are co-hosts for the show as always. We're also really lucky to have Maura McDonough and Meredith McCleary from Hamilton Place Strategies with us, going to join us, especially in the last segment. We're going to get into some of the more fun indices in trying to understand what's going on with the economy. I always think we always feel like we're sort of archaeologists, peering through data and looking at different corners of economic activity to try to figure out what's going on. And even in an economy like the United States, where we're really great at data collection, it still requires forensic work to try to figure out what is really going on and what does it mean and how's it's going to impact policy. So I'm excited about our last segment. We're going to get into some unconventional ways of trying to understand what's going on in the economy. John and Brendan, we had some of the conventional ways recently of understanding what's going on in the economy, like we had jobs reports and we have prices, durable goods order, all kinds of stuff. But this month, as we've noted before, we do not have an FOMC meeting, but we did get FOMC minutes to peer through and try to discern how at least the Federal Reserve's Open Market Committee is seeing things. And I don't know that we got a whole lot of breaking news out of it. I mean, it seemed like a steady as she goes sense out of those minutes. Did you guys see it anything differently?
Yeah, the minutes were kind of a Rorschach test, right? There was a little bit of everything. If you wanted to see some dovish hints in there, there were the statements talking about how the pace of interest rate hikes would be slowing over the coming months. This isn't news, and this is all priced in, but it also isn't something that the Fed has talked that much about. They've been very focused on the near-term inflation fight. So that was and concerns about, and some discussion about the growth impact that has obviously come into the discussion more to the fore, and to create a little bit more balanced picture, but still, uncomfortably high was the characterization of inflation, and very little nod to the improvement in the CPI and the consumer and producer price index data that we saw earlier this month for the July readings, which were, modest improvements, let's face it, but still pointing in the right direction. The minutes didn't really delve, didn't put too much stock in that, citing little evidence of inflation slowing down. So there was really a little bit of everything, and left the Fed with tons of optionality. This was, and the minutes were, obviously, you have to put everything in context. They were followed by a barrage of FOMC speakers coming out in the same day ensuing days, talking about just how aggressive they still have to be on the inflation fight. And, specifically some putting 75 basis points as their preferred rate hike increment again for the September meeting. And the market is really in this, in this space. Is it 50 basis points? Is it 75 basis points? The difference between these two isn't as great as the market perception, but that's how markets work.
One of the things that I definitely took away from it was maybe it sort of is it's like it would it's like fodder for the hawks a little bit, and I don't think the market is certainly seeing things this way, but they seemed to be less impressed by the huge decline in commodity prices, right? Like they recognized it, but they seemed not like it's not going to factor in a huge way in their thinking, at least in the near term. Did you read that the same way?
Yeah, I think that's fair. They really haven't emphasized that, and the whether it's lower commodity prices, whether it's, indications that the housing market is cooling down rapidly, and other signs of economic slowing, they really haven't. They've stayed on message, which is really about the inflation fight. They've maybe made some nods to this sort of thing, but it's the market seems to be making a bigger deal of it than the Fed is. Now that is, that's good policy. And we've discussed it before. They want to give themselves rhetorical cover. And so if they're looking at things improving, the fastest way to, to maybe to reverse some of the progress they've made is to talk about how much progress they've made.
Yeah.
And so
it is interesting given where the sort of the rhetoric is on this, because look, obviously everybody wants to see this go away. Now, I wasn't old enough in the 70s to be really paying attention to how the Fed was reacting to signals it was getting on pricing at that time. But I know the history of it, and failing to be fully committed to to really reining in inflation whenever there were times when you thought you had it on the run. This is definitely, and I always often wondered how that happened. Weren't they smart enough to know that you really have to be committed to it to show? This feels to me like one of those moments, and where this Fed is not going to blink on that. They're not, because all of the rhetoric out there, you have the White House. I'm not critical of them for this, but the White House out there telling us, every day how many consecutive days gasoline prices have been down, and there's like a lot of talk about how it sounds like inflation has peaked and prices are down, and we're on the good side of this. I see some of the rhetoric on the progressive side of, do we really want to, force unemployment when it looks like things are improving? And you could see how in a more political place they could take the eye off the ball. But what I glean from the minutes is that they're not doing that. They're committed, and they're going to try to make sure that the Fed is credible on their, credibly committed to inflation fighting.
Yeah, and 6 months ago, they obviously didn't predict a war in Ukraine, which helped drive commodity prices up. So much of commodity prices is out of their hands anyway. So I think they're just being honest about it. It wasn't our fault that it went up, but it's also not necessarily you shouldn't give us huge credit for it coming down also.
Yeah. Also, and when you look at the outlook here for, we saw some very dire returns from Europe, data from Europe, and the gas situation there, the energy price situation is, everybody's worried about the winter and about what that's going to look like. We've got natural gas prices in Europe on the rise again, very persistently high. So it's one of these things that, even if there is improvement, you could be, it's hard to see that, you don't want to blow an all clear on something like that.
Yeah. Natural gas prices on the rise here too, as well, right, John?
It's the energy situation in the U.S. has been very interesting, and we've just seen this. We've seen a complete change in. We talked about this shale patch and the gas and oil drilling in the U.S. We have a very different market. Obviously, we have our own domestic supplies of natural gas, and so we do have some differentiated drivers here onshore, fortunately. But some of those are, you still have a very different kind of profile in the shale patch. You have supply discipline in a way that you haven't in the past. And so it's hard to look out into the coming quarters and see a lot of relief on their energy price, unless, barring some sort of miraculous detente in Ukraine, which it just doesn't appear to be in the cards.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of the international side, can we switch to how central banks are dealing with some of these things around the world right now? Because we're seeing a lot of divergence, and we saw. I don't want to say it's weird activity, but you have different economies running at different speeds and reacting to it in different ways. So a big number out of the UK, 10.1%, double-digit inflation in the UK. They seem to be, well behind the curve in dealing with it. The continued socioeconomic experiment in Turkey of President Erdogan insisting on cutting rates, even as inflation is over 80% and could be going higher from there. China cut rates. I think, if I think of some of the worrisome things, it's what you mentioned in Europe, where ECB has a big challenge because of the economy is clearly slow. Germany impacted energy prices. The UK seems to be behind. China needing to do a lot more to revive growth there, and Turkey really worries me, from a strategic standpoint. Is often associated with political instability, and that's not a place where political instability would be welcome. Certainly not in that region, in that country, and this time. How are you thinking about how all of these countries are dealing with it, guys?
Yeah, the news from overseas has been really terrible this week. Let's just face it; it's been awful. We had the week started out with China's July growth indicators. They all undershot. Even the downgraded consensus expectations, they were all worse. And this is what the numbers they publish. And everyone knows that Beijing tends to, there tends to be a bit of stage managing in some of these numbers. So grains of salt all around, but they still look bad. And we saw overseas the UK's consumer confidence, although their retail sales kind of held up, their consumer confidence index was a disastrous record low. Very similar in Germany. We're getting more consumer and economic in the EU. We're getting more consumer and economic sentiment out of gauges out of Germany next week, and those are expected to be routinely just down and awful. It's not a pretty picture. And that's, it's leaving central banks as tough a spot as the Fed is in. The ECB is, they've got a multi-front set of challenges, trying to keep Italian bonds and peripheral bonds from freaking out while wading into this stagflationary morass as the economy just it's held up. As we've said, the economies of European countries have held up better than we expected, but this is a game of attrition here with the costs continuing to stay high and rising. We saw a producer price index number out of Germany this morning that was just appallingly high and just dramatically surprising to the upside, almost owing to the energy price increases, and so it's a big challenge, and central banks are trying to balance that. The expectation this week is that after the data that we saw, the Bank of England is going to have to get more aggressive. The European Central Bank's going to have to get more aggressive. Japan's CPI came in a little bit higher than expected, which is still really tame in the grand scheme of things. But the Bank of Japan is sticking with its dovish focus on growth and supportive monetary policy, totally out of step with most of the rest of the world. And China is trying to ease a little bit monetarily, while last week was an announcement of more fiscal stimulus. This week is an announcement of more fiscal stimulus, but we've seen Beijing come out with plenty of other supportive policies over the past few months that really hasn't seemed to move the needle very much on their growth. And there are concerns in the background about power and blackouts and brownouts and that sort of thing as the rivers dry up. Yeah, it was a
not looking
downbeat week, a parade of horribles. The dollar obviously reacted strongly, and that's not just dollar strength. We did have some surprisingly firm retail sales in certain categories, and some other positive surprises in the Philly Fed survey and that sort of thing this week. But it really was, when you're looking at dollar strength, is it dollar strength or weakness in the peer currencies?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's weakness in the peer currencies. They're just taking a beating, and rightly so.
Yeah.
Though it also shows you how much is going on in the world, that the fact that no one has any water is like the fourth story we talk about.
Yeah, the low water it has lots of implications for them, and I think you're right. I think it's an underreported issue. But to be clear, you have two European countries at war with each other right now, so you understand why those headlines are being dominated by that instead. But it's a big story. For some commentary on all of these things, we're going to look next week to Jackson Hole, the central bank, Federal Reserve Monetary Policy Community will be out for the annual Kansas City Fed summer. What do you call it? Summer. It's not a holiday. It's a summer gathering.
Symposium.
It's a symposium. It's a symposium. It is a symposium, in fact. Yeah, good point.
The symposium where they all the central bankers around the world put on jeans that they just bought that are like aggressively blue.
Very aggressively blue.
They're pleated.
And boots.
Boots.
So this definitely seems like a perfect opportunity for Powell to present exactly what he's thinking. You like you said, we don't have a Fed meeting in August. We have to wait till mid-September. So if Powell isn't happy with what is being priced into the markets, this is his opportunity to change the narrative.
What do you expect to hear from him, Brendan?
I actually kind of think things are going fine. So I don't think he wants to rock the boat very much. The Fed speakers this week have really hit hard on, we're not going to stop until inflation is under control. So I think that's the message that they wanted to convey. But I also don't think that necessarily means they have to raise 75 in September. They could, there are enough weaknesses and cracks in the economy, especially the housing market, that it probably does warrant maybe slowing the pace of the hikes, but certainly not stopping the pace.
Yeah, and next week we get the Fed's preferred inflation metric for July core PCE prices, and then we get a whole other set of inflation data, a whole another month of data. Hooray! The August data. Yeah. Before the Fed is called upon to make their next rate decision in September. So that's September 21st, and so
and this week the big story, it was kind of a funny story, but actually is very indicative and has monetary policy implications. That the price of chicken wings is now back below where it was before the pandemic. And that's funny, and so where football season's coming back, so chicken wings are going to be cheaper, but chicken wings were another one of those, goods components that went up because of the unique dynamics of the pandemic, where you couldn't produce enough and everyone was staying at home and they wanted chicken wings.
Brendan, I think you have just given us the perfect segue into our next segment, unwittingly.
No, as I started to say it, I realized that I did present the perfect opportunity to go.
You did. So I want to welcome Maura McDonough, Meredith McCleary from HPS to join us at this point. Perfect moment to jump in on this. Guys, could tell us what are the you guys did a little bit of research on the set of unconventional indices out there, and I'll tell you, like, the one that I'm probably our audience is most familiar with, because Alan Greenspan used to talk about it all the time, is the men's underwear. And so we look at sales of men's underwear to determine how the economy is doing, under the presumption that if men are not feeling good about the economic outlook and their employment and earnings situation, they're going to be disinclined to buy new underwear. They'll just wear the old underwear for as long as they can, rather than wasting money on new underwear. So I don't know if underwear should be seen as a luxury for a luxury preference, but maybe we do. Maybe we indulge ourselves with new underwear when things are going well. Hey guys, welcome to the show. And what are the ones that you guys have unearthed for us that are getting a little bit of attention right now?
Hey, Tony, happy to be here. So I think let's continue with the men's underwear index. I find that one super interesting because while I was researching all these different indicators, they're kind of a mixed bag of accuracy. Even though people continue to believe them, a lot of them just don't really hit the mark. But the men's underwear index is actually surprisingly accurate. So Alan Greenspan, he first came up with this around 2008. And so there's not a ton of data to look back to, but in 2007 to 2009, sales went down. And then in the 2010s, they started rising up again. So that one actually seems to be a pretty good indicator. But what throws a wrench in this whole theory is men don't really buy their own underwear. So there was a survey in 2009 that shows that men on average only buy underwear for 17 years of their life. The rest of the time it's their mom or it's their wives and girlfriends. So that adds a whole nother level.
I'm so proud of myself. I actually buy my own underwear.
Me too. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I don't think 17 years is way higher than mine. I think I had like 4 years in there.
And it does give an interesting context to the next index I wanted to bring up, which is the lipstick index. So this is probably the one most people are already familiar with. It came about in the early 2000s recession. The chairman of Estee Lauder saw that sales of lipstick were going up 11% despite the economy going down. So he coined the term the lipstick index, just based off his own company, Estee Lauder. However, people started looking into it to see if there was evidence of that. And sales actually went up during the Great Depression by about 25% of cosmetics in general. However, this is a great example of cherry picking data because you can find plenty of examples when there was a downturn and then sales went down, or there was an upturn in the economy and sales went up. So the lipstick index isn't really that reliable.
Yeah, and I'm sure the pandemic threw that all. No, because of Zoom, I guess you actually had to get yourself made up, even though you weren't going to the office. So maybe you bought more lipstick actually if you were working remotely.
Did you guys see anything on that?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, actually, so during the pandemic, what they found is that sales of skincare went up because this idea of self-care, luxury, probably masks are making you break out. Sales of fragrances went up for some reason. Maybe this idea that killing the COVID bacteria.
You know what, though? You were like living close to people like all day long. So maybe actually hygiene actually did improve during that time. If you're like stuck in a house during lockdown with people that like, you're going to notice their smells a little bit more than when you're going in and out, I guess. I don't know. This is all guessing.
And lastly, mascara sales went up during the pandemic.
There you go.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. Just above the mask, needing to be made up and everything.
Was there anything, did you notice anything on retail clothes? I mean, the clothes, was there?
Yeah. So there's the hemline index, which basically, it was developed in the 1920s, but it's been miscredited by the economist who developed it. But the theory is that skirt lengths reflect sentiment of the times. So skirts get shorter in good times and longer in bad times. So after the 1929 Wall Street crash, for the Great Depression, skirts got longer after the 20s when they were shorter. There are different rationales for this. They're short skirts signaling independence, long skirts kind of signal austerity, modesty, and utility. But I think a really important factor here is like two big things, is the cultural forces and general societal forces. So 1950s, we see good economic growth, but skirts remain long. And that could also be credited to Dior introducing the really like the longer kind of full-bodied skirt that became really iconic in the 50s. So they introduced that in 1947. But also, we have to remember that there is a multi-trillion-dollar a year industry that completely influences how fashion is seen and how women choose to wear, all the way up from the designers themselves through fast fashion stores. So this can be a little bit tricky. There is like some solid data on this and it is supported, but again, it could be cherry picking. And there are so many other societal forces that I'm hesitant to really commit to this one, but it is just like fun to think about.
Yeah, I think it's fun to think about. I think, look, I mean, until the real presence of fast fashion, the lead times on fashion they still are really long for a lot of for most design. Fast fashion has taken a big chunk away where they actually can design. It's aptly named. It's fast fashion. They can adjust to changing tastes and styles very, very quickly, within months even. But most fashions actually, like if you're a major fashion house today, it's not like you're thinking about, winter or spring. You're thinking of, winter of 2023, right? Like you're designing for far out in the future, longer than you may have an indication or a sense of what, or be influenced by what's happening with the economy, right? So if you're thinking economic downturn right now because you're hearing recession a lot, I don't know what the fashion implication for that would be. How, if you were a designer, what decision you would make based on thinking, well, I'm hearing that the economy is going to be slow in 2023. So then you would do what exactly? I don't know.
You'd have a barrel with suspenders on it. Isn't that what they in the old timey cartoons?
Yeah.
They always wear a barrel. During.
That actually gives a great segue to the next indicator about if you hear the word recession, what does that mean? So there is also the R word index. So what this is, it was created by The Economist. They tracked how many times the New York Times and the Washington Post said the word recession each quarter. And this one is surprisingly accurate. It predicted it in 1981, 1990, and 2001. But it's kind of a chicken and egg problem. Like, are they just saying recession more because recession is happening? Is it that obvious? Or is this an example of a self-fulfilling prophecy? Like if you start talking about recession, people get worried, people might stop spending money, that might compound and then actually create a worse economic problem.
And now you have the Google data. So how many times people Google recession or Google inflation? So that's real-time data. And I know the Fed looks at things like that. It's not obviously the only thing that's driving them, but the new real-time data that's produced by all the search engines is actually can be very powerful economic indicators.
All of these things, look, I mean, we joke about them sometimes a little bit, but the truth is it really is hard to figure out what's happening with the economy because data are slow to get. So indicators do make some sense. I mean, one of the things that we do our own economic sentiment index, even where we ask people how they're feeling about things. We do get a sense of how people are feeling about things, but people, it's not that they lie, it's that they perceive things differently. So they may feel like things are good for themselves, but they don't think good things are good for other people, so it's a really it really is hard to sort this out sometimes. What are some of the other ones, guys? Let's run through them and get quick takes on some of the others that you've discovered.
Sure. There is the Champagne Index, which is economist first. Yeah. Sorry.
That makes sense.
Yeah. It seems a little obvious, but what makes it even worse is it's not leading or lagging. It seems to just coincide with the economy. So, but it's a pretty steady indicator. There's the RV index, which is interesting because I don't know many people who buy RVs, but when people stop buying RVs, that is a leading indicator of a recession because it's sort of the ultimate big ticket, I don't need this right now item. It happened in 1989, 2000, and 2006.
One thing I will say, though, is that RVs became like impossible to find and to buy during the pandemic because you couldn't be like traveling anywhere else. So even though there was economic downturn, a lot of people who would have put that money towards flying to Europe or somewhere decided to buy an RV and just drive around the country. So that's an interesting one.
In 2021, you couldn't buy either one, a new one. The supply was gone.
Is that supply coming back in the sense that I don't?
Yeah, so there is the supply back, and actually now everyone the plot.
They've just seen like used RVs.
Realize they don't want them, so there is now a bigger secondary market for them also.
I wasn't disappointed with like used RVs showing up. I was more worried about everybody bought pets, and I didn't want people to dump pets under.
Well, that's happening too, yeah. But here on the Cape, it's called Nauset Marine. It's the place you go to buy a boat. And last year at the 4th of July parade, they had a little, float, and on it said, "We don't have any boats. See you next year." And this year they have boats.
And I couldn't find steady data on this, but mentioning pets, I saw one indicator that there's an increase in pet nappings, like people stealing pets from ransom during economic downturns.
Yeah. Like Lady Gaga's dogs got napped after her dog walker got shot. It was crazy.
Well, my dog took a huge dump on the breakfast nook bench this morning. So if you want a dog, I got one for you.
The next indices, guys.
There's the skyscraper index, where once a very tall building gets built, it's right before a bust. So the best example of this is the Empire State Building, 40 Wall Street, and the Chrysler buildings all going up right before the Great Depression hit. World Trade Center and Sears Tower in the 1970s, but it's
now in Manhattan we have all the
you see that in San
towers, that are sell for whatever $70 million.
Yeah. By the way, there's a great book I read, if you can find it. It's called Higher, 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 and it is literally about this moment and the race in New York City to build both the Chrysler Building and Empire State Building in the midst of the start of the Depression, and it's a really really terrific book if you love that kind of.
And I took my kids to Rockefeller Center a few months ago, and Rockefeller built it just to give people jobs in the Depression. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, the signs of, just as an aside, the signs of excess in markets. Obviously, we've talked about the inverted yield curve as a recession indicator before, but one of the other things that always gives people a shiver is a gigantic IPO, like a industry leading, massive, drum roll please, kind of IPO. And it was, you go back and look, it was like Goldman IPO'd in 99. They were a little early before the bust, but boy, I mean, talk about timing. And Blackstone's IPO in June
all the private equity
07. And then Glencore, the huge commodity giant, in 2011, just before the commodities markets just fell down an elevator shaft. These people know their industries, and and I saw on Twitter someone say it can't be a recession because Adam Newman, the WeWork guy, just raised $350 million, so it can't possibly. It's the music's still playing out there.
Last two guys, let's see, the plastic surgery index.
Yeah, that one's a little weak, but we saw that plastic surgery declined by 9% in 2008, which makes sense. It also reminded me, this is a little anecdotal, but when I went to the dentist recently, they started asking, when was the last time you came to the dentist? And it got into a conversation that a bunch of people just didn't go throughout the pandemic. That was one of the things they stopped doing. So I bet there's some type of dentist index that we could also find.
I bet, yeah.
Then the last one is the diaper rash index. And it's this theory that I don't think any of us should endorse for any new parents, but a theory that during hard economic times, parents change diapers less, leading to an increase in sales of rash creams and baby powders. And for 2022, specifically, sales of these products were up while diaper sales were down. I think we also need to remember that there was a whole supply chain issue with like a lot of baby products, but this is one that all the other ones for personal decision making really just do whatever you want. But this one specifically, I wouldn't recommend it to new parents.
Yeah, I would just say that like it probably for the COVID period is so strange, but also because of the because of people's lifestyles changing so much. Aside from economic factors, it's changing because of forced living kinds of factors and commuting kinds of factors and communicating kinds of factors like Zoom. And those aren't economic as much as they are lifestyle, work style kinds of changes. but then also the supply chain issues, just like so distorted everything. It's just hard to say. It's hard to get really good, vibes out of those to indicate the future. But always fun to look at. Maura, Meredith, thanks for joining us today. Good fun. We'll check back in. We should have an update every now and then too. If we see, if you guys discover a new index, something new or interesting, come back on the show and tell us about it. We always love to find new ways to think about how things that are impacting the macroeconomy.
Can do. Thanks for having us.
Right. John, Brendan, what are we looking at next week? You mentioned PCE. Yeah.
So, and also you mentioned that the Jackson Hole will be the big story of the week. It's not just U.S. central bankers; it's global central bankers. So there'll be a lot of headlines out there, and we get the personal income and expenditures, and within that report comes the Fed's preferred price measure, the PCE price index, and that runs lower than the CPI, and they actually use kind of the same components that the BLS does, but they weight them differently. So housing has a lower share in the PCE, and medical care has a higher share in the PCE. What the PCE does is actually they take all the components of everything we as Americans spend, and they just divide it, as a percentage. And then we get all the global PMIs around the world. So that'll give us an indication of how things are going.
All right, guys. So it'll be a fun week next week with hopefully lots to talk about. We'll hopefully get some of the good Jackson Hole chatter to discuss on the show next week. But Maura, Meredith, thanks for joining us. John, Brendan, have a great weekend. Everybody, listeners, have a wonderful Dog Days of Summer weekend.
Thank you for listening to the Macrocast. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and share.